Excellent. All right. Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to Action Begets Hope, Unpacking and Tackling Climate Change with your secondary students. My name is Marie Tremblay, and I'm with the Alberta Council for Environmental Education, otherwise known as ACEE. And I'm super delighted to be co-presenting this session with two awesome co-presenters, Caitlin Chandler, who's the Corporate Environmental Specialist with the Climate Change Program at the City of Calgary, and Dr. Melanie Hoffman from the King's University Center for Visualization in Science. Welcome, you two. I'm so glad to be presenting with you today. Now, for everyone who's on this session, please note that throughout this presentation, we'll be sharing a lot of useful resources that you can use with your students. And if you're interested in getting a copy of our presentations, including links to these resources, we'll show you how to contact us at the end of this presentation. And also note that this session is being recorded and will be made available through the Alberta Council for Environmental Education's website. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of the Alberta Council for Environmental Education, we are a small nonprofit organization whose mission is to advance environmental education in Alberta's K-12 schools. Our vision is that Alberta's students are environmentally literate and equipped with the knowledge and skills to help create a sustainable future. And now, now that you know a little bit about us, we'd love to know a little bit more about you guys out there. So please use the chat if you don't mind. You can access the chat at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And it would be nice to get a bit of an idea as who's with us today. I see Kyla, welcome from Langevin School, grade 7. All right, Karen, welcome. Teaching, looks like she teaches math. Okay, and grade 8. Dina and let's see now, Jen from junior high from Fairview. That's nice to see, and welcome Dina. Lester B. Pearson. Okay, biology. Forest Lawn. Okay, fabrication. Really interesting. Grade 9 to 12. Science and biology from West Island College. Welcome, Krista. And Trevor from St. Gregory School, grade 7 science. We're seeing a lot of math and science representation here, not too surprising. Monica, welcome from 12 Mile Coulee, grade 7. That's great. All right. Well, thank you for that. It's always nice to know who we're dealing with. And so we really appreciate you coming to our session, and we're super excited to be presenting here today. Now, I do want to take a moment to emphasize that this workshop is part of a 2-day environmental symposium here at the CCTCA titled Hand in Hand, Working Together Towards a Sustainable Calgary. The symposium represents a collaboration between the Alberta Council for Environmental Education, the City of Calgary, and our environmental education community. And we've got 12 exciting sessions going on that cover a range of topics, including the Eco School Certification Program, biodiversity, waste and water management, climate change, and that's what we're going to be talking in this session, and Indigenous perspectives. In order to better meet your needs, we have created 2 streams. So there's an elementary and a secondary stream. And I just want to point out that this workshop is designed specifically for secondary teachers. And I see that most of you, I think, have come to the right place. So that's nice. And just as noted earlier, all of our sessions in the symposium are being recorded, and they'll be made available through the ACE website. Now, to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing today, here's a bit of an outline. So here I am providing a bit of an introduction, but then I'll also walk you through our brand new roadmap to excellent climate change education. Then we'll hear from Caitlin Chandler from the City of Calgary, telling us all about what's going on at the city in terms of climate action. And then we'll hear from Melanie Hoffman from the King Center for Visualization in Science. And Melanie is going to talk all about climate solutions. And then I'll come back at the end to do a little bit of a wrap up. All right, first off, I really would like to acknowledge that the City of Calgary is located on Treaty 7 territory, a traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route of the Blackfoot Nations, including the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai, as well as the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda First Nations, and the Métis Region number 3. We further acknowledge that the long history of Indigenous peoples is inextricably tied to this land. and that a unique relationship exists between Indigenous peoples and the natural world. This relationship, which is based above all else on harmony with Mother Earth, has allowed the original inhabitants of these lands to survive and thrive for thousands of years prior to the arrival of the first Europeans. And as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission has recognized, reconciliation will never occur unless we're able to be reconciled with the earth. So today we honor and acknowledge the knowledge keepers, elders, scientists, artists, youth, and teachers like yourselves who seek to move us toward reconciliation, not only with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, but also with our mother, the earth. And we'd like to acknowledge another reality that teachers are facing this year, COVID, of course, and the many challenges and constraints that teachers like you have to deal with because of it. In our minds, you are our true heroes, and we are so happy to be here at the convention to support you in the important work that you do. So hats off to all of you for that. All right. Now, I'm going to launch into the first part of our formal presentation here, which is to introduce you to our roadmap to excellent climate change education. And just here to start out with, I'd like to get a sense of what kinds of barriers do you guys face when thinking about teaching or tackling climate change with your students? So I've listed a number here, and they're actually numbered for a reason, is because I'd love to for you to use the chat and tell us which of these barriers resonate with you or that you have faced personally or are familiar with. So we're talking about, a lack of emphasis in the curriculum, a lack of confidence, pushback. It's a depressing topic, or that there's no time in the curriculum to cover this. Do any of these resonate with you? Yeah, so we're getting someone here talking about number 3, which is the pushback. Yeah, outdated curriculum, not dealing directly with climate change. Absolutely, the curriculum. 1 and 5, yeah, that's the curriculum and the lack of time. Absolutely. Any more barriers that you've faced? Okay, there's another number 3. That's the pushback one. Apathy. Interesting. Okay, I didn't actually have this on the list per se, but actually, Regina, I'm kind of curious now, is that apathy on the part of teachers or students, would you say? I'm curious about that. Some great comments coming through in the chat here. Getting students, maybe that's the apathy part, perhaps, getting students to buy into the idea that we have to be the ones to make the changes. And the students, apathy by the students. Okay, that's so interesting. Right, well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that that's really helpful for us as presenters to understand what you guys are up against. I will circle back to these barriers at the end of the presentation during the wrap up, and we'll see how we did. I mean, our intent here really is to walk through and actually address these barriers. So that's why I want to come back to this. And actually, speaking of addressing these barriers, let's talk about the first one here, which is the curriculum. And I want to address this one right off the bat. Well, as someone so aptly pointed out in the chat, we know that our current curriculum is quite outdated. And because of that, there are very few explicit references to climate change. But, as Margaret Atwood put it so aptly, it's not climate change, it's actually everything change. And when you start to view it in that light, you can start to see all kinds of connections between climate change and the curriculum. And to help teachers see these connections, we've identified links to climate change for every unit in the science and social studies curriculum from kindergarten to grade 9. And in doing this work, though, we realized the importance of broadening those links to other sustainability themes, including place in nature, as well as Indigenous perspectives, with the idea that in order to ensure a sustainable future, it's really important to help students connect to and care for the natural world. And the connections that we've created take the form of age-appropriate questions that you can explore with your students. And here's an example on your screen taken from the grade 9 science curriculum. This is relating to the biological diversity unit, topic A. You can see how, it's possible to make all kinds of connections to nature and place when we're talking about ecosystems, and a wonderful opportunity to link to Indigenous perspectives as well as to climate change. So all of these links are available on the ACE website by grade and by subject. And we'll be sharing all of these links later on. Don't you worry. We are actually currently working now on the links for grades 10 to 12, and we hope to release those later this year. So stay tuned for that. All right, now this brings me to our roadmap then. Last year, my colleagues at ACE and myself produced this roadmap to excellent climate change education, and it's actually available from our website as a downloadable PDF, and the link is right here on the slide. The roadmap outlines 6 key strategies for moving students from a state of confusion, anxiety, and apathy, as you can see at the top here, to feeling informed, prepared, and optimistic about the future. And one thing you'll notice when you read through these 6 steps is that very few of them have to do with the science of climate change. And yeah, for sure, we'll talk about this under stop number 3, the build literacy part. But this workshop is really about education about climate change, the education part of it, okay? So that means it really focuses on the student and creating a sense of hope and optimism for the future. And actually, I'm thinking now that maybe that has something to do also with the question of apathy that several of you brought up. Now, many of you, based on the chat, are science teachers, right? So maybe your natural go-to place is to look at climate change from a scientific perspective. And that's why I'm talking about this, is that science is just one small piece of actual education around climate change. In fact, in this presentation, I'm really going to emphasize number 1, which is this whole idea of listening to your students and understanding them. And also, we're really going to focus hard on the solution space. So you'll pardon me if I do move a little bit quickly through these, but we've got some great content today and only an hour to cover it. And I want to make sure that I leave time for our other guest speakers as well. Now, I want you to think about, as we embark on this road trip together, think about your own learning around climate change when you yourself were a student. Well, if you're like me, you really didn't learn anything about climate change in school, okay? For obvious reasons, it just wasn't in the curriculum. And so that means that, you know what, we need to accept that none of us here are going to be experts on climate change. So let's just forget being experts, and we can't rely on what we learned. So we need to be comfortable then exploring this topic with our students and treat it as an exploration. So the purpose of this workshop is to show you how to embark on this journey safely so that everyone comes out of it feeling better, informed, more positive, and empowered to make a difference. All right, so stop number 1. Stop number 1 is all about listening to your students and to each other. And remember, the starting point is your students. And here I've got a quick question for you. Let me just provide a bit of context first. But, you know, last year, with the help of a well-known polling company, Lakehead, we conducted a province-wide survey of 500 youths across Alberta, aged 15 to 24, and asked them questions around their attitudes towards climate change. And based on their responses, they basically fell into 3 categories. The alarmed, they're the ones who are the most concerned and most willing and motivated to get involved and do something about it. The concerned passives, which are also concerned about climate change, but less motivated to get involved and feel less threatened directly. Then we have the dismissives, and those ones, you know, I don't place much personal importance on climate change. I don't think that they can really do much about it. So in your experience, and just a quick question for you guys to think about, if you think about your own students, which category do you think that most of your students would fall in? And I'll just let you think about that for a minute. Either alarmed, concerned, passives, or dismissives. All right, well, it turns out that according to our survey, 55% of the youth in our survey actually fell in the alarm category. And that's 55% of 500 youth all across Alberta, both in rural and urban settings. Another 35% fell into the concerned passives category, and only 10% fell in dismissive categories. I don't know about you guys, but I was a little bit surprised by this finding because I would have thought that there would have been more dismissives out there. So interesting stuff to think about, and really thinking about, you know, what you guys brought up about the question of apathy. But anyways, overall, 90% of the youth that we surveyed said that they were actually moderately to very concerned about climate change and the environment. And the full report with these findings is available on our website, and there'll be a URL here very shortly. More numbers from this survey that we saw. The survey showed that 70% of high school students are concerned about their future as a result of climate change. And 2/3 of them agree that education around climate change should be a high priority. Those are really, really big numbers, and particularly here in Alberta. And we also conducted a series of 14 focal groups to better understand students' perspectives. And time again, what we heard loud and clear is that students across Alberta, in both rural and urban settings, are anxious about their future and want us to do something about it. And that's the report, and you can access it at the URL there. And of course, we'll share all of this later. And we know that talking about climate change can be delicate, if not downright uncomfortable for many students. And here's a quote, and I'll invite you to just read it here from a high school student from one of our focus groups. And I'm sure that we can all relate to the discomfort of bringing up that topic around the dinner table. All right. Well, Katherine Hayhoe, who's a well-known climate scientist at Texas Tech University. She's actually Canadian. She works in Texas. She tells us that the most important thing we can do to fight climate change is to actually talk about it. And that's why I'm talking about this right now. So how do we go about doing that, though, without immediately getting into a heated argument? Well, she gives some great tips, and this is there's a link here to the TED Talk. We don't have time today to listen to it, but I would invite you to listen to her talk. But she talks about the importance of connecting climate change to our values and really listening to what those underlying values are. What do people actually care about? And then kind of connecting the dots then to climate change and particularly climate action. So she offers, Katherine Hayhoe offers a really good approach, which is to focus on shared values. But we also need some techniques on how to do this properly. And thankfully, there's a tool for that. And this climate conversation tool, which is offered through the David Suzuki Foundation, I think is really awesome. There's a great little video here, by the way, promoting the tool. It's fun to watch. The link is there. But really, this tool is a conversation coach that simulates a Facebook Messenger conversation. So this is it's not live, it's on the website. Okay, so there's no safety concerns there with your students. But basically, it coaches you through a 5-step process that consists of asking questions, listening to what people say to really understand what they're talking about, what they call care about, reflecting their point of view to make sure that to let them know that you've heard what they're saying. Find something that you can actually agree on, and then share your thinking by telling a story from a personal experience. All right, so this is like a whole process we're talking here about empathetic listening, a really great tool. And I think that, I could totally see junior high and high school students using this tool and practicing it. It would be a whole lot of fun. And here's an activity that you can do with your students to actually practice this. Okay, this activity, by the way, is available online. You can download it for free. It's very easy setup, and maybe some of you have already done variations of this activity already. But basically, you set up like 5 stations, either in a line or around your classroom, that represent a spectrum of positions from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And then you read out statements, and your students move to the station that represents their level of agreement with that statement. Now, obviously with COVID, you might need to modify this activity to respect physical distancing, but maybe using a show of hands instead. So here, there are some statements that are provided, and they're good conversation starters. But of course, you can make up your own, or even better yet, you can engage your students in making up some statements and using those. Now, up until now, we haven't really practiced listening, though. And so I like to build in an extension to this activity. And that is that after students have taken a stand or stood, at their position on the value line, rather than having them explain their own position, get them to find someone else with as different a view as possible from them. And then using the climate conversation coach's 5-step process, get them to understand the other person's viewpoint. And then they can share that viewpoint with the rest of the class. And this is a great way to practice talking to people who share a different viewpoint and truly understanding that viewpoint without getting into heated argument. And from there, it might be possible for students then to highlight what it is that they agree on and where the differences lie. And these areas of differences can then become future areas for investigation and to think critically about the evidence that supports the different viewpoints expressed. So what a great way for a class to learn together and at the same time address all sorts of preconceptions and misconceptions that students might bring with them to the classroom. Now, before embarking in a discussion activity like this, though, that could be a bit delicate or controversial, it's always good to establish some ground rules. And remember, it's really important to create a safe and supportive environment where students will not be chided or singled out for holding certain views. So just to summarize what I've been talking about here, I want you to encourage to think about having a conversation, not a debate. We're really talking about the opposite of a debate here. We're talking about truly understanding each other. All right. And then that's a really important distinction to make if we want to depolarize the conversations around climate change and to start making progress together. All right, on to stop number 2 of our road trip. Connect with nature and place. Now, you might be wondering, okay, what does that have to do with climate change? Well, actually, it has a lot to do with climate change because the root cause of the climate crisis really is that our relationship with the earth is broken. And more than anything, we need to heal that relationship. And the best way to do that is to help students understand that we're a part of nature. We're not separate from it. So we need to get away from this typical Eurocentric or Western worldview, which tends to view humans not only separate from nature, but actually above it. And even when we talk about stewardship, there's a sense of human domination or oversight, conveying the sense that nature is something that we can control or that we need to manage or take care of. And by contrast, Indigenous perspectives view themselves as part of nature, not separate from it. And what an interesting lens through which to explore the concepts of connectedness, reciprocity, and responsibility with your students. Let's see now. So place-based education, what a great opportunity to connect with the place around us and understand the impacts caused by climate change that are all around us, and a really great place to go and for students to connect with that. Remember, climate change isn't some distant abstract phenomenon, but is happening right here in Alberta all around us. So there's lots of really good reasons for connecting to nature and place, as can be shown here, particularly in time of COVID. It's a safe place to be. All right, so I'm going to move quickly now on to stop number 3, which is building literacy on environment, energy, and climate change. And the emphasis here being on including not just the social, but the science dimensions. So many of you are science teachers, I noticed. And you know what? It was like super important to teach about the fundamental concepts and mechanisms, the importance of using consistent and accurate language, and use real data and evidence, all right? And here I'm just going to very quickly walk you through several resources that you can use, but here's an online quiz, kind of a fun place to start. How much do your students actually know as a starting point? Here's another good starting point. Why not just ask your students, what is it that you want to know about climate change? And I'm sure they'll generate a whole list of questions, and off you go now. You've got a whole series of interesting questions to pursue with your students. If you're not sure exactly what to teach about, though, there are excellent guidebooks out there, like this guidebook put out by the US government, which is the 7 Essential Principles of Climate Science. A really nice little useful document to keep you on track. And that's a great way to protect yourself from any kind of pushback from parents or administrators who might be asking, well, why are you teaching that? Well, actually, because it's considered one of these 7 essential principles of climate science. Now, I love this slide here from a PhD student, Seth Wines, who at least last year anyways, was a student at the University of British Columbia. He kind of translated those same principles into just common language. So I think these ones are really easy to understand. So the earth is warming, it's bad, it's because of humans, experts agree, and we can fix it. Now, in his research, Seth Wines made a really interesting observation. And that is that most climate education in K-12 schools across Canada tend to stop at number 2. And maybe that's part of the reason why we don't like this topic, or this topic is scary, is because we stop at the it's bad part. However, he really encouraged us to keep going and to make sure we include number 3. Number 3 might seem a bit taboo or uncomfortable, but actually it's actually part of the good news story here, because it's caused by us, we know, through the burning of fossil fuels primarily. That means that we can actually fix it. All right. And you guys are science teachers largely. So number 4 is also very important, which is, helping students understand how the scientific community has reached a consensus around climate change. There really is there is no debate around that, right? The only debate that there is to have is what do we do about it? Now, very, very quickly, this is stuff out of textbooks, but you can find them on the website. Understanding the mechanism of the greenhouse effect is really important. There's all sorts of great data. I'm only showing one slide here. This is from the NASA website. Excellent real-time data that students can look up and see for themselves what's going on, okay? And I have more these kinds of websites that I've put at the end of the presentation under resources. Closer to home, we've got the Alberta climate records. Students can go to that website and see exactly what's happening. For example, here, I pulled up, for example, a graph here of temperature change, mean temperature change just here in Calgary. And you can see that our temperature has actually increased by 2.1 degree. These are real climate records, okay? So very credible sources of data that I'm trying to point you to. Now, beyond the science dimensions, it's, there's lots here to do on the social dimensions when we talk about questions of social justice, global citizenship, the Sustainable Development Goals, or even in science, when we talk about those all-important STS connections, or talking about careers for the future. So very quickly, exploring what the Pope has to say about climate change. He wrote a whole encyclical about it called Caring for Our Common Home, and called climate change the moral issue of our time. His big concern is just about the inequalities of, the impacts of climate change in some countries being impacted more than others. And you probably know that climate action is goal number 13 of the SDGs. So really great reasons to tackle climate change with your students and look into that. All right, so finally here, just to really quickly, critical thinking. Okay, there's so much opportunity for critical thinking to develop all kinds of skills. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Critical Thinking Consortium, but they are a wonderful place to learn more about how to develop critical thinking skills, as those that are listed on this screen. There's no shortage of misinformation out there and disinformation, and so lots to do around critical thinking and understanding what makes up a credible source of information. And if you want to play, a version of Mythbusters with your students, this Skeptical Science website is a really fantastic website that provides really good evidence, all based on peer-reviewed literature around the most common climate myths. All right, so lots of room here for critical thinking. All right, so this brings me to stop number 5, and I'm almost done my little part here, but this is really the most important one, so I want to set it up properly. But stop number 5 is helping students be part of the solution. And maybe, this is a really good way to overcome that apathy that you guys are experiencing or noticing. We're really talking about here moving your students out of the problem space into the solution space, okay? And if we go back to Seth Wine's framework, moving this line, right, from don't stop it, it's bad, but go all the way down to we can fix it. And this is what we've heard in our research, as students tell us time and time again that they want to hear about those climate solutions, and they want to know what they can do to solve the crisis. All right. Students are basically telling us then to stop arguing and stop denying and get on with the job of helping create a better future, their future. So let's get after it then. And what a great place to start then with our own municipalities. And on that note, Caitlin, I'm going to hand it over to you. we don't I'm just going to invite people, if they have questions, they can put them in the chat. And for the sake of saving time, we'll try and address those questions as we go along in the chat. So feel free to add your questions there. Caitlin, I'm going to stop sharing then. And if you want to queue up your presentation, hand it over to you and tell us what's going on with the City of Calgary.
Okay, yeah, thanks so much, Marie. That was a great presentation. I assume you can see my screen now. Just let me know Perfect. If you can't. So as Marie said, I'm Caitlin Chandler, and I work on the City of Calgary's climate change adaptation team. And today I'm going to introduce you to the City of Calgary's own climate action plan, and we can chat about how you and your students can, help get involved in climate action. So for the past several years, the City of Calgary has also conducted a citizens' perception survey to understand Calgarians' perspective on climate change. And what we've been finding is that the majority of Calgarians are concerned about climate change and think we need to act now. And we've seen these numbers increasing year over year. So while the survey that Marie highlighted demonstrates that youth in Alberta are concerned, this survey demonstrates that, in fact, adults in Calgary are concerned as well and want to take action. Despite what you might be hearing, the vast majority of adults in Calgary are concerned and want to take action. So what does it even mean to take climate change action? Well, you can think about it like this. With a medical diagnosis, a doctor can treat the cause of a problem or the symptoms. And with climate change, it's the same. So climate action can come in the form of addressing the causes, or in other words, reducing greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change, which we call mitigation. Or you can address the symptoms, or in other words, prepare for the impacts associated with climate change, which we call adaptation. So this is one way to think about climate change action that individuals or students can take. We can all take actions that either reduce greenhouse gas emissions or we can take actions to prepare for climate-related impacts. With students, it's typically good practice to keep the tone positive and not scary. So often that means focusing on mitigation actions, what can we do to solve the problem? But it's important to remember that there are still great actions that students can take in the adaptation realm. So for example, if we know climate change is likely to negatively impact our pollinators in Calgary, then maybe we could help, build a pollinator garden in the schoolyard. That would be a good example of an adaptation action. So at the City of Calgary, we look at climate action from the same perspective. In 2018, City Council approved Calgary's climate resilience strategy, which outlines the actions that the city will take over the next 10 years to reduce our contributions to climate change and to prepare for climate change impacts. So we've divided the climate resilience strategy into a mitigation action plan and an adaptation action plan. Why does this matter to you and your students? We know that from the surveys Marie and I both mentioned that more people want to take action and see action on climate change. And we also know that people feel more inspired to take action and more hopeful if they understand that we're part of a community that's collectively working together toward climate action goals. Remember, one of the stops of excellent climate change education highlighted in ACEE's roadmap is about creating hope and agency by helping students be part of the solution. So what better way to give students hope than to connect them with this real-world climate action plan to let them know that collectively Calgary is taking action. And in fact, the city's climate action plan does set a specific, measurable citywide greenhouse gas reduction target that we need to work towards as a community. And that fact alone might be inspiring to students. It's a measurable target to point and work towards collectively as a community. So we'll talk more about that specific citywide greenhouse gas reduction target in a moment. But first, I want to do a quick activity with you guys and make sure we're all on the same page about the concepts of mitigation and adaptation. So let's try to sort these climate actions that I'll bring up into the correct side of the Venn diagram. So you can type in the comments either left, right, or middle based on where you think the climate action should go. So let's start with this one, energy efficient technology. Do you guys think this is a mitigation action, adaptation action, or could be a bit of both? I see a adaptation, I see a both. Okay, I see a both. So I, for the most part, would consider this energy efficient technology to be a mitigation action. And the reason is because if we are, producing technology or using technology that is energy efficient, we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is the cause of climate change.
Caitlin, can you just refresh our memory as to the distinction between mitigation and adaptation, just quickly, just to reorient people again?
Sure. Yep. So mitigation means, reducing greenhouse gas emissions to reduce our contribution to the cause of climate change. Whereas adaptation is, actions that build resilience to the impacts that we will experience because of climate change.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, keep going. It's great.
Okay. So here's the next one, flood mitigation. What do we think this one here is? I'll just refresh my chat here. Adaptation. Yep, and that's right. I would stick this one in the adaptation category. A little confusing because the word mitigation is in the title, but really, like I said, when we're thinking about adaptation, climate adaptation, we're thinking about things we can do to build resilience to climate change impacts. So, getting prepared for flood events would be considered a climate adaptation action. What about this one? Building design and infrastructure. Any ideas for this one? I see someone said both. I would actually stick this one in the both category as well. And that's because, it's a little bit vague, but we could design buildings to be more energy efficient. We could design them to, in a way that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we can also design buildings to be more resilient to climate impacts. So in that way, I think it's both kind of mitigation, reducing the cause of climate change, and adaptation, preparing for the impacts. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip through the next few here. But I just wanted to highlight that this is a pretty good activity to do with your students. Think about all sorts of different climate change actions and divide them between mitigation and adaptation. So let's get back to that citywide greenhouse gas reduction target that I mentioned earlier and what the city's doing to reach that goal. So let me click one more time here. So that measurable target that we've set for all of Calgary is we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% below 2005 levels by the year 2050. So what you see on the, the left side of the slide here is our citywide greenhouse gas emissions in megatons, and along the bottom you see years since 2005, and that target is represented by this dark dotted line at the bottom. So the key takeaway here is that our citywide greenhouse gas emissions are still trending upwards. This is a problem and needs to turn into a downwards trend, and we have a lot of work to do to reach this 2050 goal. So we should all be asking ourselves, what can we do as students, as individuals, as classrooms, as businesses, as a municipality? What can we all do collectively to turn this trend around? And I think it was someone named Jen wrote in the comments that, one kind of barrier is students not buying into the idea that we have to be the one to make the change. Well, I can tell you that this is a very ambitious goal for Calgary, and reaching this goal is going to require, collective action from the municipality as well as, everyone in Calgary. So what can we do about it? So in order to know how we can most effectively reduce our contribution to climate change, we first need to know where greenhouse gas emissions come from. So here's a snapshot of where our emissions are coming from in Calgary. Overall, you can see that almost 70% of our emissions come from the energy that we use to heat, cool, light, and run appliances in buildings. So that's either our homes or the bigger buildings like commercial and industrial buildings. About a third of our citywide emissions comes from fuels and energy used to propel our vehicles around. And then a tiny amount, about 1%, comes specifically from the emissions released when organic waste decomposes in our landfills, and that releases methane. So naturally, we've designed our mitigation action plan to reflect these sources of greenhouse gases. So if you want to inspire actions with your students, maybe this is a good place to start. Look at where local emissions are coming from in the first place and figure out what you can do as a class to reduce emissions in these categories. So let's take a quick look at what the city is doing in these categories. To reduce emissions from buildings, we're working on ways to make it easier for building owners and homeowners to install solar panels. And we've also created a map that displays the solar potential of each building in Calgary. So if you go to calgary.ca/solar, you can view this map, and perhaps a neat project to do with your students is to check out the solar potential of your own school. To help reduce energy consumption in buildings, we've launched a program that helps larger buildings in Calgary share their energy information publicly. And this kind of helps them compare their energy use and learn from one another about saving energy. So many of the schools within the CBE can be seen on this map. So the cool activity to do with your students might be to go online and see if your school's on there and compare energy use in your school to other buildings. Here are some examples of what the city's doing in the transportation category. We've got an EV strategy that aims to make it easier for Calgarians to own and charge electric vehicles. Calgary Transit recently introduced 4 new Max Bus Rapid Transit lines, and these bus lines make public transit more appealing than single occupancy vehicles because they have more frequent service, fewer stops, dedicated bus lanes, heated shelters, real-time information displays, etc. And we also have a number of actions we're taking to enable increased walking and cycling around the city. So I want you to think, what can you do with your students in the transportation category? Maybe something like a bike or walk to work campaign or a no idling campaign. Or I should say school, not work. And then finally, the majority of greenhouse gas emissions from the waste sector, like I mentioned, are specifically from methane emissions that are released from compost and organic material decomposing in our landfills. Remember, this is only 1% of our citywide emissions. But to reduce methane emissions from organic waste, the city has constructed a landfill gas collection facility at each of our active landfills, which reduces thousands of tons of emissions annually. And in 2017, as I'm sure you all know, we also implemented the Green Cart program, which means organic waste goes to a composting facility instead of a landfill, which reduces methane being emitted from landfills. So I'm almost done here, but the question is, what can students do to help? Well, the City of Calgary has created a resource for citizens to learn about everyday actions we can all take to reduce our contribution to climate change in the same 3 categories that we know our emissions are coming from: buildings, transportation, and then waste or consumption, lifestyle kind of category. So we've done the research to rate more than 40 actions on a spectrum of 1 for good impact up to 5 for greatest impact. And these ratings are based on Calgary-specific information. So the actions you see on the screen are all specific to the things you can do to reduce energy in buildings or in your home or in your school. Here's all the actions that you can take as an individual to reduce emissions in the transportation category. And finally, this category we've kind of wrapped up waste, lifestyle, kind of consumption style actions. So you can go online and see details about each of these actions, and you can download a checklist of the actions. And I encourage you to do it with your classrooms. Remind your students that although climate change could be a complex challenge that is overwhelming, the solutions don't have to be. Remind them that the more actions we all commit to taking, the greater the impact we can have on climate change. And collectively, Calgarians are making a difference. The same website, calgary.ca/climate action, I just want to mention, you can go online and check out these recorded webinars on different kinds of climate actions. They're suitable for, focused for an adult audience, but suitable for kids as well. And I also want to mention that the annual Mayor's Environmental Expo is a free event for schools meant to empower youth to take action on climate change and environmental action. And you can go online to this website to, get information about it and sign up for a mailing list. And at the same website, you can also learn about this youth environmental grant for students who want to do environmental projects. And finally, I just wanted to mention about the Climate Game Changers program offered by CPAWS. So this program engages students in climate literacy And they offer 2 one-hour sessions where students explore past and present climate changes in Alberta, gain an understanding of the impacts that climate change has on our ecosystems, and then talk about how to develop climate solutions. And this is appropriate for grades 10 to 12 for the following curriculum units. So that's all from me. With that, I'll hand it back to Marie, and I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have in the chat.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. It's so great to hear everything that's going on with this city. And I'm just going to invite now Melanie to queue up her presentation and invite everyone. If you have questions for Caitlin, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'm sure Caitlin will be happy to answer them. What we're really trying to impress upon you guys here is that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Our very own city has a climate action plan. And I think, there's a real opportunity for us to just get on board with that plan and get involved as teachers and students and the whole school community in implementing the plan. So thanks, Caitlin, so much. I see that Melanie's ready to go. So over to you, Melanie.
Thank you so much, Marie, and thank you, Caitlin. Let's explore now some free interactive online climate solutions learning tools and lesson plans developed by Alberta students at the King's University in Edmonton that invite users to interrogate data, draw their own conclusions, and ask good questions to prompt thoughtful engagement. As we move toward action, thoughtful engagement will assure we are building a more just and equitable society, uplifting all people. It is in this spirit that I join you from Treaty 6 and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4 territory in Amiskwachie-Waskagan, or Edmonton. COVID-19, as you know, has forced us to slow down while also demonstrating that system-level action is possible. So let's work together to ensure that mindful transformation toward a renewed relationship with all that gives us life that Marie spoke to earlier, and recognize that the root of the symptoms we are experiencing globally does not lie simply in an action such as burning fossil fuels, but really arises in how we view our place in the world and our relationship to each other. Indigenous knowledge and culture are important starting points for climate solutions in your classes, and relationality and nature connection offer deep vitalization for our students, especially right now during COVID. What has given me life these past years has been consulting with the King Center for Visualization and Science, working with remarkable undergraduate students, such as these beautiful faces from our COVID summer, and empowering partners such as ACEE. Out of the collection of free online interactive peer-reviewed science visualizations at kcvs.ca, I particularly want to highlight our brand new Planetary Boundaries. Investigate planetary health over time with this tool developed in collaboration with the Stockholm Resilience Center in Sweden. Need more on the science of the climate and ecological emergencies? You can interrogate much of the data highlighted by Marie earlier at kcvs.ca and through explainingclimatechange.ca. Interactives such as the Build a Planet or historical temperature record tools can even be useful in math class. However, when we use that limited time we have with our students to engage with climate, as Marie mentioned, let it be focused on solutions, action, and engagement. And so our students will now introduce you to the Design Our Climate Simulation 3.0, a video you will find on the launch page at climatesolutions.kcvs.ca.
Climate change is everything change. Let's explore what you and I can do now to bring about a better future.
The unintended consequences of the amazing lives many of us lead are causing us to wake up to the impacts of continuing with our current rates of greenhouse gas emissions. Imagine a better future and be curious about how we can reduce our global emissions with the Design Our Climate simulation from the King Center for Visualization in Science.
At kcvs.ca, peer-reviewed, online, interactive learning tools to see and understand science are accessed by 500,000 people from over 100 countries each year. The Design Our Climate simulation is a comprehensive, semi-quantitative model of global emissions projected from now until the year 2100. It has been reviewed by over 25 local, national, and international experts. Design Our Climate invites you to design your climate future using currently available technology.
The simulation starts with a climate future with continued increased rates of greenhouse gas emissions. We can also see past emissions, which can be toggled between the past 20 and 250 years. Why start mitigating greenhouse gases today? We can limit how much we need to adapt and reduce suffering in a rapidly changing climate. This can feel like an overwhelming challenge. The best way to tackle a big problem is to break it down into small actions we can do right now, which we call wedges.
Explore the different sectors: electricity, transportation, land use, buildings, and materials. Check out the 2 sliders common to all sectors: global population and carbon capture and storage. Some sliders represent changes that can replace each other. As one slider increases, another will decrease. These sliders also indicate emissions relative to each other. Make a prediction. What will happen if we set a goal to increase the percentage of solar electricity? Remember, you should try to keep this realistic. Your progress is indicated by how many wedges you have eliminated and how this in turn affects selected physical realities of our planet on the climate impact circle below. Click on the impact circle graphs and question marks to learn more about any impact or slider.
When you're done, review a summary of your design and its climate impacts. Did any one action solve the problem? The What's Next button brings you to some debrief questions. How do you think your vision could be achieved? How soon? What will the transition look like in your own community? Who will struggle, and how can we support everyone to ensure a responsible transition? Be sure to explore further resources like Project Drawdown for already available, physically and economically viable solutions. Which of these will you advance first in your life and your community?
Start your journey now. Follow the prompts, then design your own climate future. Put in place your action plan, and when you're done, tell us your next steps. We want to hear from you. DOC supports individual as well as group exploration, with lessons and supporting materials for school contexts, such as 14 to 18-year-old youth, and for community groups.
Act now to design our climate future for the sake of children and our planet's future.
Now, you can frame all your students' learning through that empowering question of how we are shaping our future world. I highly recommend the film 2040 as a powerful entry point into this visioning exercise. Here, a father paints evocative pictures of the world that may be 19 years from now. How old will we and our students be at that point in time? The film offers opportunities to reflect on adaptation toward resilience and is an artful introduction to currently available drawdown solutions. If you've heard of Project Drawdown before, maybe drop a yay drawdown in the chat right now. What can we restore, relinquish, and reconcile with as we transform our society to meet the most foundational human need and want, maintaining a habitable planet, bringing human life on Earth back within planetary boundaries? Have your students develop a vision of what can be on climatesolutions.kcbs.ca, recognizing we already have all the technology we need to transform our way of life. Design Our Climate invites you on a personal exploration. What have you learned during COVID about what is of true value, what really matters, and what will you do next? A key practice, even for us scientists in this context, is to create space to be with difficult emotions, experiencing grief, understanding that the world in which we thought we would grow old no longer exists, as that world is physically changing every day at unprecedented rates. Mindfulness and sharing circles are important to guide an open, kind, and compassionate engagement with our bodily sensations and strengthen our habit of meeting our experiences with curiosity and kindness. In the What's Next pages, you will find helpful resource links that will support you on this journey. Appreciating the foundation a thriving environment forms for our society and our economy, we recognize in Climate Solutions the big opportunities that lie in our human impact on our planet. We have a role to play in our future that is bigger than most of us acknowledge. This is a call to active citizenship, to practice systems thinking, and to develop our carbon handprint, how we are taking action. Commit to the next actions that most ignite you. One at the level you control and one at the level you influence. What do we want to let our elected representatives know about? Let's ask them how we can support their work and what can our communities take on directly. Climate solutions are about system change, and we are all a part of that system. So as we break this overwhelming problem down into more digestible wedges and see the mosaic of solutions we need and we know in drawdown solutions, the imperative opportunities of both individual and systems level change become clear. This integrates into every subject. Even with our old curriculum, we're invited to keep zooming out to this foundational topic that has such rich relationality. The planetary boundaries and the Design Our Climate simulation provide many entry points. Invite your students on an exploration of the underlying science and mathematics, the geological and ecological impacts, social opportunities, storytelling, community art projects, literary engagement, formal writing exercises, such as news articles, blog posts, or letters to companies, banks, and elected officials. Draw your colleagues in, so this tool is with students across grades and across subjects, demonstrating how this touches all aspects of our lives. These evidence-based future building exercises offer students career perspectives and skill development that spans all of Alberta education's competencies. You can download guided online lesson plans on the Climate Solutions website to meet your curriculum goals in science, social studies, and English language arts for grade 9 and 10. And adapt these exercises, exploring planetary health, local energy sources, and active citizenship for your contexts, grades 7 through 12. Have your students compare their vision for Calgary in 2040 to the city's plans, adapting approaches from the EcoCity Edmonton project, Youth Empowering Greater Community Climate Solutions, and engage your students in the grassroots movement Drawdown Alberta, of which I am a co-founder. Type into the chat now one commitment you are making to yourself. What's one context in which you will use KCVS resources or other materials from this workshop today before this school year ends? Which wedge will you facilitate next? I look forward to hearing about your work as we all move this needle together. Thank you to everyone here today for the meaningful work you contribute.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for your very informative and thought-provoking presentation. I love the demonstration of the tool, by the way, which I want to reemphasize is available to all students for free. Just go onto the website and start exploring. Just as we transition here, I'm going to proceed with a wrap-up, but Melanie did offer the opportunity, invited you to and put in the chat, what next steps do you think you might be willing to take on this journey, and share that with everyone, and that would be great. I just have a few final slides here to share, so I'm going to take back the sharing. And once we've wrapped this up, just a few slides here to go through, I will share with you, don't let me forget, the link that will allow you to contact us to get these fabulous presentations and other resources that we've been talking about. All right, so while things are going on in the chat, let me just do a bit of a wrap up here. Now I've lost the chat, which is always a little bit frustrating. So let me see if I can just bring that back so I can see what's going on. Yeah, there we go. All right, Melanie talked about the Project Drawdown, and I just wanted to put another little plug for that one, actually a big plug here, front and center on our screen. Fantastic website to explore with your students. They've basically ranked and evaluated and ranked the top 100 solutions for drawing down CO2 levels from the atmosphere. That's where the name comes from. And you can explore this with your students. What I love about this is it's all about the solution space. These are all solutions that are based on today's technology, so they're actually available to us. And totally ties in with Melanie's Design Our Climate tool. These things are all kind of like related, if you will. Same with that movie 2040, which is really a film about implementing these solutions and what would the future look like. I love too, what a great opportunity to explore with your students careers of the future. You know, for those apathetic students, what a better way to engage them in this than to start thinking about the future and future possibilities and what role might they play in the solution space. So the website highlights all of these 100 solutions, and really students can go there and click on a solution of their choice. And as an example, electric cars, if you're interested in that, then you can just access here a whole schwack of information around that particular solution. So highly recommend. Just a couple more things to wrap up here. Don't forget our roadmap. It is available as a downloadable PDF. So that's one of the resources. Remember, we're really trying to move our students from a state of confusion, anxiety, and apathy. We've heard about that from you guys, right? To getting them feeling informed, prepared, and optimistic. And what better way to do that than to involve them, engage them in climate solutions. We've talked a bit about curriculum links, and I just want to re-emphasize that we have all of these wonderful links, and these are available on our website, and they can be accessed by grade and by subject area. We've mentioned that earlier. Just one last little thing here I want to point out, and that is the Eco Schools program. You might have heard about it already, but we've been working really hard with Eco Schools Canada, now in partnership with the City of Calgary and the Alberta Council for Environmental Education, to bring the fantastic Eco Schools program to Calgary. It's basically an environmental certification program, and it offers an extensive library of over 40 actions to choose from. And many of those actions, as you see on the screen, relate to climate action directly and relate to, we've been really busy linking those to the City of Calgary initiatives. So just a wonderful resource to check out. And I just, in closing here, want to provide a quick reminder about other sessions that are going on as part of our symposium. Remember, it's titled Hand in Hand, Working Together Towards a Sustainable Calgary. Tomorrow morning, we'll have another session on biodiversity in the city and another one on waste management, taking a really interesting cradle to grave approach to waste management in our city, both specifically designed for secondary teachers. And I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize, the fantastic support we've had from our funders who, without their support, obviously this work would not be possible. So we're super grateful to that. And this brings me then to the last slide of our presentation, which provides you with all of our contact information if you want to get a hold of us. Here's our email addresses. And now I'm going to put in the chat the link that I've been talking about for a while here, where you can go to access the resources. So this is will take you to a very quick form that you can fill out, and just provide us with some basic contact information so that to get on our mailing list, and we'll send out all of our presentations with the resources here. There's also an opportunity in that form to provide some feedback, and we love to get feedback from teachers and to hear what it is that you liked or didn't like so much about our workshops, so that we can continue improving those. That feedback is super valuable to us. So if you care to share your thoughts, we would be very grateful. And so on that note, I just really want to thank, first of all, our co-presenters. Thank you so much for Melanie and Caitlin for joining forces here to offer this session. It's been lovely working with you and really appreciate that. And also thank you, all of you, for joining us. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your convention. Now, this is the last workshop of the day, and we are using our own Zoom account. So I'm going to stop the recording here. And you know what? We have an option